Okay, welcome to another video. What we're going to do in today's video is take a very quick look at the latest beta for Ubuntu 20.10, which has just been released. So we're in the live ISO right now, and I do believe we have a new record for the largest ISO size of Ubuntu, weighing in at 2.8 GB. Now I can't remember an Ubuntu ISO being that large. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. So we're going to open up Ubiquiti Installer, and I do believe that's even a new icon there. I could be wrong. And we're going to install it onto the main PC here. Right, so English is the language. And we want to go for English UK there, and let's just, as always, double check that the keyboard is working correctly and click continue. So usually I would always go for a minimal installation for myself, but as we want to check out this new 20.10 beta in all of its glory, we're going to go ahead and go for the normal installation, which would include things like Office suite of applications, games, media players, etc. And we are also going to grab the third-party software and additional media formats. Continue. Right, so I do believe we've got to the point where it's scanning our disks. However, we do need to double check what device Fedora is installed to, because I'm still currently testing that. So let's jump into Gnome disks, and then we can just make sure that we don't do anything silly. Okay, so Fedora is currently on Dev SDA, and it's the Drevo SSD. So we just need to make sure we avoid that when selecting our disk. So we have a couple of options here. We have erase disk and install Ubuntu, where you're basically signing over it all the way over to the Ubiquiti installer, and they'll set up your partitions for you. Or of course you could select something else and then set up manually the partitions you want with different file systems and all of that good stuff. And then we have advanced features here, which will then expose the LVM and also the option for ZFS. And you might notice it no longer says experimental anymore. So I think that's new of this version. Previous version of 20.04 I'm pretty sure still said experimental when selecting ZFS. So it appears we've matured past the experimental stage at least. So we're going to cancel that and just go for erase disk and install, and let the installer set it up however it wants to. So let's go to continue, and we need to avoid this disk and jump down to the SanDisk here and click install now. Right, so it's a very simple partition layout. We're going to get one sort of partition for our EFI boot, and then the rest is all going to be assigned to root at ext4. Now, if I remember correctly, Ubuntu will create a swap file probably around about 2 GB. We'll check that out when we're installed. So let's continue. And London's the place to be. Well, it's debatable. Okay, user account time. We're going to keep this one nice and simple and just call it Tile Ubuntu. Password, and we're going to log in automatically. And you might notice we have a new option here as well, which is use Active Directory, which I think was something that Microsoft started off for, like domains, Windows Share or something. I've never actually used it, but that's a new addition that's made it into this installer. So as soon as I press continue, I'm going to start my stopwatch and we can see how long this takes to install. Okay, and with that being said, I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so installation has completed just over 4 minutes, coming in at 4 minutes and 8 seconds. So let's restart and check out our freshly installed Ubuntu 20.10 Gnome desktop. Okay, and here we are. So let's very quickly just run through this. So let's click next. I'll send my information. I'm going to leave privacy sort of location services disabled. So let's click next. It's nice that you automatically have it disabled though. Okay, that appears all that we need to do and we're good to go. Interestingly, we didn't seem to get the sort of guided welcome tour for Gnome 3.38, which has been included in some of the other desktops that are currently shipping with Gnome 3.38. So I'd be interested to see if that will be included in the final version. So let's just quickly see if there's any updates to get before we go crazy. Let's just open up the GUI. Wrong one. Let's type in update and go for software updater there. And we'll just quickly see if there's anything to get before we continue. Okay, so we do have a few updates to get here. So what we're going to do is pause the video here and then come back to it once this has completed. Okay, and that was done in no time at all. So we can get rid of that and take a little look around. Now, I actually really do appreciate the default look of Ubuntu. The Yaru theme is probably one of my favourite default themes out of any distribution, especially when you put it in the dark theme. Unfortunately, it appears that they're not quite ready to unveil the groovy Gorilla wallpapers, although I'm very intrigued to see what they do across all of the flavours with the Gorilla inspired new wallpapers. So first of all, let's jump into a terminal. type in uname A and see what the new kernel that this ships with is. So we are now shipping with kernel 5.8.0-20-generic. So let's get out of that and then jump into the about section in Gnome Settings. And as you can see there, we are on the Groovy Gorilla development branch, and the version of Gnome is 3.38.0 and the windowing system is X11. So let's get out of that. In fact, let's quickly jump into the wallpaper part and see if there is any new ones included as of yet. So let's go to background. No, so we've still got the standard sort of set that you would have found in the Focal Fossil release, but not to worry, let's continue. So we're going to jump into the default applications. I'm pretty sure nothing's really changed there. And of course, now that we've got Gnome 3.38, the application grid has had some nice enhancements and there is no frequency tab. So we have some games like Solitaire for the Gnome desktop. We have the Deja Dup backup tool, which we will be setting up to do some backups over the network, probably on a daily sort of basis schedule. We then have, of course, Gnome Calendar. Firefox is our default web browser. Nautilus for your files. We have the full LibreOffice suite, which should be version 7.0.1. Let's just double check that now. It is indeed 7.0.1.2, and of course it will have dictionary support out of the box. So let's get out of that and let's just keep going with these applications. As I say, I don't think too much has really changed here. So we have Remina for remote desktops as per usual, Rhythmbox for your music. So the Ubuntu software store, I do believe, is just the Snap version now. So if we go into a terminal again and type in Snap list, you'll notice there we have the Snap store as well as the other sort of Snap dependencies, etc. So we don't actually have the deb version as far as I'm aware. So if we were just to type in software, as you can see, the only software store that's going to appear is the Ubuntu software store. However, you can install your deb packages in here, but I'm probably going to go ahead and install Gnome software as well as the Flatpak plugin, but that's just me. And we do have some more updates to grab here, so again I'm going to pause the video once more and then we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so I do believe that update has completed. So what we're going to do before we sort of go crazy and make some modifications and install some additional packages is go ahead and install htop and see how much RAM we are using at a fresh reboot. So we're just going to do that in the terminal with sudo apt install htop. I'm going to chuck a Y there. In fact, you don't tend to really need to with htop, so it should just automatically go straight through it. There we go. Let's see what it says now before we do a reboot. So as you can see, we're currently using 1.2 GB out of 32, and there is the swap file that it has created for us of around about 2 GB. And if you go into the root folder of your hard drive there is your swap file. Of course, you can create a larger one, etc. So what we're going to do now is reboot, check the RAM, and then continue with the rest of the video. And we are back. Startup time seems super fast as well. There was no waiting around for it to reboot. So let's go into htop now and see what this is giving us. So we're currently using about 1 GB of RAM, which is quite high. But then again, this is a beta version and that could all be sort of improved when the final version comes around. So we've dropped down to about 976. Of course, if you were to have done the minimal install in the installation there, then that would be quite a bit lower than what you can see right there. So let's get out of that now and keep going. So what we're going to do then is go ahead and install the Synaptic package manager and then see how many packages we have got installed out of the box. So sudo apt install Synaptic. And Synaptic is actually my preferred way of managing packages in a GUI when I'm on an Ubuntu based distribution. Right, let's now jump into our overview and type in Synaptic, and there we go. So type in our password. There'll be a little dialog somewhere, and there it is. Let's not show this dialog at startup. And let's just see how many packages we do have installed there, bearing in mind we have installed htop and of course Synaptic. So we've got 1706 there, which is a fair amount of packages. I'm not 100% sure what the minimal sort of selection is, but it's going to be a lot lower than that. So while we're in here, there's going to be a few changes that I want to do. So I'm not a massive fan. Well, they're fairly decent games, but I just don't play any of the real like Gnome games like Solitaire and Mahjong. So we're going to remove them, and we're also going to remove Thunderbird. It's a very good email client, but I'm much more of a Evolution kind of guy with the Evolution EWS package, because then I can get all my sort of Office 365 stuff that I have to use for work to sync with the tasks, reminder, calendar, and all of that good stuff. But nothing against Thunderbird, very good email client. So let's go ahead and go into the search here. So first of all, we're just going to go very simple and type in Gnome Games, and that should pick up pretty much all of the games there as long as they are tagged as Gnome Games. So if we now go to Solitaire and remove that bad boy, and let's remove Sudoku, and let's also just remove the lib gnome game support things for it, because I don't really need those either. So that's going to remove Gnome Mines for us. So I think that might be all we need to go ahead and remove, as well as Thunderbird, of course. So let's get rid of that as well. Now let's search for Thunderbird and get rid of Thunderbird. So where's the standard Thunderbird? There it is. So let's go for Mark Complete Removal, and then that will also remove all of the dependencies for it, like gnome support, locale, etc. And now let's just double check to see if there's anything else that we don't really need during our time with it. So transmission, very good torrent client, so we can keep that. We are going to want to go ahead and install VLC. Gnome videos or totems, fairly decent, but I much prefer to use VLC for most of my media. Okay, I think we're good to go to leave the rest here for the moment. I don't really need to worry about anything else that's currently installed. So that should be us good to go with the removals. So now what we're going to do is install a few packages. So I'm pretty sure that we don't have Flatpak installed out of the box. Let's just double check that before we go ahead and install it. We don't. So we're going to install Flatpak, but I'm also going to install Gnome Software, as well as the Gnome Software Flatpak plugin. That way we can use the GUI of Gnome Software to also install our Flatpaks, but we're going to do that in a different way in a moment. So let's go ahead and type in Evolution. Evolution. I can't type today. I have to keep my keyboard in like a fairly annoying place when I'm doing these videos. Right, let's scroll down to E, and we're going to go ahead and find the... I'll tell you what, if we just grab this, that should mark everything that we need to get with it. So as you can see there, that's going to put in all the evolution stuff that we need, including EWS. So let's mark that now, and we're going to apply that. So I'm going to pause the video here. That shouldn't take too long. So it's 19 packages are going to be installed, 10 are going to be removed, and we're going to be using an extra of 183 MB of space. No, that's what's going to be freed. Nice. Right, we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so that has now complete. However, there was a couple of things that I did also forget. So I'm going to want to get Chrome Gnome Shell, which is going to enable it to connect with Firefox on the Gnome Extensions website. So we can go ahead and install Gnome Extensions, and we're going to need Gnome Tweaks as well, which I do believe pulls in Gnome Extensions now on Ubuntu. So if we go sudo apt install Gnome Tweaks and Chrome Gnome Shell. That's pretty much all we're going to need for the moment. The rest we're going to get through a Flatpak. We're also going to get GIMP from the native repo. So let's let that do the good stuff. And while that's installing those packages, let's go ahead and jump into Firefox and go to the Gnome Extensions website. And then we're going to download the browser plugin. But I'm going to wait until the end to actually get my extensions, because I don't want to change things up too much at the moment. So someone mentioned in a comment the other day on the Fedora video that I very quickly clicked I agree without reading it. I have read this before, so it's all good. Let's go I agree. Right, Gnome Shell extensions. So let's just grab the little browser extension here. And as long as that package installation has finished, pressing refresh now should get us good to go. Perfect. So I'm not going to worry about that for now. We're going to come into that towards the end. Now what we're going to do is jump onto the FlatHub website. So I've got nothing against Snap, so I'm just very used to using Flatpak with FlatHub, and then I also quite like app images, but I stick to the native packages as much as possible anyway. But when I'm on a GNOME desktop, I'm going to want things like Kdenlive, and I find these are the best ways to do it. So we're going to go to Quick Setup, click the little Ubuntu logo there. So I do believe we just installed Flatpak, didn't we? We might have forgot those, so what we're going to do is grab that just in case. So let's go back into our terminal here. And let's just split that side by side. So we're going to copy that straight over, and then we're going to go back, and then we want to go and grab this Gnome Software plugin as well. So what that's going to do is that's also going to put in everything for the Gnome Software Store. That way we can use the Gnome Software Store to use it to get the packages we want in the Flatpak. We might have to do something funny with the sources in Gnome Software Store though. So what we're going to do is now just add that on the same line. And we will also need to add the FlatHub repo, but we'll do that once that's all installed. Okay, so that, as you can see there, that's going to grab Flatpak, Gnome Software Common, and the plugins, etc. So let's go ahead and let that do the good stuff. And that is just about done. Right, now what we're going to do is add the repo here in order to, as I said, get the packages we want from the Gnome software store. We will need to do a reboot though for them to actually appear. Perfect, yeah, as you can see there, you will need to do a restart before they appear on your desktop. Now before we do that, I'm going to just quickly set up some keyboard shortcuts because I kind of use my own sort of shortcuts on Gnome. But before we do that now, so as we've installed Gnome software, you'll notice we're going to have two software stores. So it'd be up to you if you wanted to remove one and keep the other. I'm not too fussed. I'm going to keep both there for the meantime because I am going to be using the Ubuntu software store throughout my time with it as well when we're doing the full review. So what we're going to go ahead and do is jump into Gnome Settings. Now I only really need a couple of shortcuts to be changed in the keyboard, and it's basically just moving workspace and moving windows between workspaces. So if we now go to keyboard shortcuts and find move workspace above, I just like it nice and simple, control up and control down. So let's just make sure that's working. Perfect. And then I want move window one workspace up and down, and again very simple, just control alt and then down, and then the same for the upper space but obviously up. And now we can move windows across different desktops, and that's just the way my fingers sort of fit, so it works perfectly for me. So what we're going to do now is reboot, and hopefully the Flatpak repo is added perfectly in Gnome software and we'll be good to go. Okay, and here we are. So let's jump into Gnome software and just make sure that's all working as it should. So Gnome software. Now if we go into just the search button, we're going to search for Kdenlive, and we'll probably get a few entries here because obviously we're going to have a few different sources. So we'll start at the bottom. The bottom is the Snapcraft store there, and of course we can change the source all within the one there, as well as FlatHub, Snap, and we should have the native repo there as the deb, and then the first one will then default to FlatHub in our sources there, which is what we're going to go ahead and grab. Perfect. So while it's doing that, let's jump back into Gnome Settings. So my favourite thing about Ubuntu these days is actually the theme. I really like Yaru, and it's probably my favourite theme out of any distribution like as a default at the moment. So if we just go into appearance, and they've done a good job on the Gnome Settings here, just for very easy quickly switching between it without having to go into a third package like Gnome Tweaks, etc. So I'm a dark theme kind of guy, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Now for the most part, I'm not really going to be using the Ubuntu dock because I am going to be using the Material Shell Gnome extension. But if I was to use it, I would make it a lot smaller, but keep it on the left. If I was to move it to the bottom, I'll download a package called Deconf Editor, which will let you sort of manually set the size and appearance of it and how you like it to look. And also, if I was not going to use Material Shell, I would download the Dynamic Panel Transparency extension. That way we could get some transparency in the top panel there. So let's now just move this back to its default position of the left. And while we're in here, of course, you can go through applications and set things up all within this one program here. Very nice the way the Gnome Settings works these days. And also in the screen display, you can also control your night light, do it manually or set it to sort of sunset and sunrise, which obviously will change the sort of color temperature of your screen. Okay, so I think our Flatpak has just installed for Kdenlive, so we should be able to search for it now. Perfect. So we're just going to open that up and pin it to our panel at the left, our dock. Let's add that to favorites. Nice. Right, now what we're going to do is get the extensions that we're going to be using for the rest of the time with it. So let's go back onto the Gnome Extensions website. Now that I've got Material Shell as a Gnome extension, I don't tend to need to get too many additional extensions now. I used to go quite crazy and use quite a few, but now I only really need two, being Caffeine. It's kind of a must-have for me on any Gnome desktop, the Caffeine extension. So we're going to go ahead and get that, and we're also going to go and get Material Shell now. Perfect. Again, if you've not seen anything about Material Shell, if you click the link up the top there, you can watch my video on it. Very cool extension. Right, we should be all set up, I do believe. So let me just make sure I've got everything that I need to get for the rest of my time with it. So if we go into the full overview now, we have GIMP for my editing of images and thumbnails. We have Kdenlive to edit the videos, transmission for torrents. Yep, I think that's going to be me for the rest of the time. Obviously, there will be additional things that I need to install like Steam, etc. And I will go through that probably tomorrow and get it all set up perfectly as sort of like a daily driver, and I'll be spending my time between this and Fedora. So we're going to do a final reboot to see how much RAM we are now using, that we've made a few changes. Hopefully we haven't upped it too much. Right, so we are back and we appear to have actually shaven off a few MB at our fresh reboot usage for our RAM there. So as you can see, we are now using 901 MB, so that's quite a big change actually. We didn't remove too much. We removed some Gnome games and also Thunderbird and replaced it with Evolution. Of course, if I was to disable the Material Shell extension, that would drop further still by about 40 to 60 MB. So that's been my sort of quick run through of the Ubuntu 20.10 beta. I'm now going to spend quite a bit of time with it, and over the next coming days, as the other betas get released, I'm going to be checking out all of the other flavours to the best of my abilities, but the one I'm going to spend the most time on, that I'm most looking forward to, is Ubuntu Budgie, because that is my favourite flavour out of all of the flavours of Ubuntu. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe and also join the Discord. There's a link in the description. See you on the next one. Bye bye.